Good. Well, welcome. Thank you very much for your time. As I say, disappointed we haven't got a better turnout. I did suggest that we talk through several things. First, to agree the vision and aims, which you've had a chance to look at, hopefully. To review what developments there have been since we last met, and there's a bit of a update on those. To talk about priorities, I think, in relation to the various aims that are set out for the campaign, and then more specifically to perhaps have some first thoughts about a launch at some point and what that might look like and when and where and so on. But obviously, as I've just said, given that we're a small number, you know, we can perhaps spend time doing other things if that's of importance to you around this general idea of the campaign. Perhaps I can start with the vision and aims. Do you have any comeback at all, or feedback or comments on what's been sent around? I think it's probably the second version now, because I did have a few comments the first time round. Hopefully it covers all the angles that we need to cover. Any comments, anyone? Just put your hand up if you want to speak, or jump in, basically. Yeah.
Sorry, Nigel, I'm just having a scan of the document now because I'd had some notes from Charlie as well. So just bear with me. I'm just reading. I'll listen to everyone else for a moment.
Yeah, okay. Hopefully you can all see them, can you?
Is it the 1st of September is the last one I've got? Am I on the right?
I sent something around on Friday to everybody, I think you should have had, which had the attachments, including that one. I think you were on the list, Claire.
Last thing I've had from you is the 1st of September, so I think I'm probably on an outdated version. Could you share on your screen, Nigel?
It's very, very close to what was sent around originally, I think.
Sorry.
That's all right. Let me see.
I was then thinking, I don't think I've seen that.
I'll try and share my screen if I can.
Sorry to be a nuisance.
All right. Just going to dip out for a moment, excuse me. It's going to be a bit complicated, I think. Can you see that?
Not yet.
No, okay. How about that?
Got it, thank you.
Okay. Just you want to just quick scan across that if you can. I think, you know, just to talk over it a little bit, the vision really is about improved awareness and access to high quality opportunities for experiencing, connecting with and understanding nature. So it's all about that nature connection. And then obviously the importance of that to build resilience, physical health, mental health, and families being inspired to enjoy and care for natural environments. We talked before about the importance of recognizing that our approach is a collaborative one. That's picked up in the approach section. And we also talked about the age range. I think we agreed on 0 to 25. Anything, anyone on any of that before we move into the detail, perhaps?
Yeah, the age range is great. I was just wondering, will you be dividing that into different, I guess, arms of the campaign? Because the understanding of a kind of small baby or toddler will be different to the 25 age group. Just thinking when we're kind of shaping that up and what it looks
absolutely.
Like. Really
yeah,
nice.
We did. Absolutely right, Kerry. We touched on that last time. If you look at the third bullet point under the aims of children and young people, I think that captures it. Tailor and prioritise age groups, communities and areas, etc. Okay.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And will this pull together initially? I remember there was an Excel spreadsheet that we'd looked at that had been populated with a few different resources and pieces
yeah,
of information.
yeah.
So will we be pulling those in and building on them now, or will it be
Well,
redesigning something new? And sorry, Nigel, because obviously I wasn't at the last meeting, so there may be things you've already covered.
no, that's absolutely right. I think I was going to come on to talk about priorities, and I think, you know, that's one of the things we need to talk about, how we actually use that material in the next stage, and build on it. For example, there's a suggestion that I'm going to suggest in a moment that I think one of our priorities, apart from involving children and young people, which I think is very important, to say a bit more about where we're at in that in a moment, it's about I suppose that third aim down, third heading, nature connection providers. So it's about, I think, connecting with people, organisations that are already doing things out there, getting them on board, but getting them on board with a view to actually reviewing what they do, where they do it, the sort of things they do, the opportunities there might be for the future. I think that's where that document you referred to, Kerry, becomes very important, because that's the basis on which we do that. And we contact some of the organisations that are in that map, if you like, get them on board if they're not already on board, with a view to them, you know, being actively involved in the campaign, I would suggest. Yeah, I'm seeing you nodding. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's a really sensible approach, because there will be lots of resources that are already out there. And if you've got those kind of partners that are willing to kind of co-develop something new, that just kind of like an umbrella campaign, I guess, that sits over everything else, I think that's a really sensible way of doing it.
Yeah, and I think we've talked before, and I'll make the point in a moment when we talk about communications, that if you look at those aims, that, you know, they cover all bases basically, don't they? And you know, we have to be realistic about what we can tackle, and do these things in a sort of order whereby we've got a perhaps key message up front, key audiences up front, and as the campaign unfolds and develops, we can gradually roll in some of these other aims that perhaps are not quite as a priority as these others, perhaps. Any comments on the aims here? You can see them now. I won't bother to read them all out, but hopefully they cover all the angles, as I say, all the bases that we want to cover in an appropriate way as well. There is a lot there, obviously, and we do need to be realistic about what we can do, how quickly we can do things, and so on.
Nigel, I just have a quick question. I'm really happy that the age range is 0 to 25, and I have been through since we first had our first meeting, but very conscious and mindful that it's not noted here that from a health and social care perspective, we see adults sort of from either from the age of 16 or 18, where they can make their own choices, own decisions, want to be involved, don't want to be involved. And you might be able to access them through universities, etc., but I don't know how, or colleges potentially, but I just wonder of a bit of narrative of, if you are in that 16, 18 to 25 year, then things will be different, because they are, because that's
Absolutely
how the health landscape works.
Yeah.
I wonder if it needs to be noted, that's all.
Sorry, could you just repeat the point? We need to note what particularly.
Actually, when you are 8, so generally when you hit age 18 in a health scenario, and I'll choose my daughter's prime example, cerebral palsy, hit 18, most things were now unavailable to her on her 18th birthday.
Right.
It's like she dropped off a cliff.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
from a communications, health, and anything between perspective.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's similar to the point that Kerry raised, I think, which is that, you know, different age groups come with different needs.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just wonder if we ought to really hone in on that and make the point about it. That's all.
Yeah.
Or am I thinking too much into it? And your point really covers everything.
I'm just thinking, I suppose, is there something you think we should change in terms of what's stated here, or is that something that really becomes part of the approach we take to different age groups, and recognizing the important point you make?
Yeah, that transition into adult from children, young people to adult. I think I was just wondering if the terminology ought to be in there, that's all.
Okay, well, give that some further thought. And if you've got some, perhaps after today, got some specific ideas on wording that might go in here, Claire,
Okay.
we can do that. That's fine. Yeah. Okay. Anything else anyone wants to pick up on? Again, I think given the limited number of us here, I won't take a, we won't make a decision today on these are the final things, because clearly we need the people in a larger group to sign up to these. But if you're broadly happy with those, that's on the recording here, and we can get further comments obviously coming in if people have got further ideas. Is that all right?
Yeah, I mean, it links. Sorry, I've switched my camera off because my Wi-Fi kept going strange. I thought
That's
it would
all right.
have. From a Duke of Edinburgh point of view, the age range does fit with what we do, because although obviously not the younger age range, but you can do your gold award up until the age of 25, so that goes in nicely with what we would talk about as young people.
Yeah, good. I was also going to say, I suppose, I don't know if it's what you were driving at, Claire, that you'll hear in a moment that there has been progress in terms of connecting with that older age group in terms of involvement in the campaign. The youth advisory boards that are around the county, which you're probably aware of. And I found today that North Norfolk District Council are proposing to set up a youth council or advisory council. So I've contacted someone there about that to see whether there's some connections to be made with them. And we've also, I think I may have mentioned at a previous meeting, we've made contact with some, I think they're called youth action workers at the Matthew Advice Project in Norwich, who are very keen to get on board with this. Unfortunately, they couldn't be with us today, but they would like to become involved, I think, in this as well. And that's again, I think, towards that older age range. Okay, well, I suggest we leave that there. Coming on then to really just an update on, as far as I can tell you, what's happened since we met last. There were three areas, I think. One was communications and involvement, which had Grace from Wild East, Amy and Sam from Momentum involved. And as I've just said, in terms of the contact that Sam has made, I'm pleased to say that all the youth advisory boards across the county are aware of the campaign, but more importantly, they've signed up to it. There is a commitment in their plans for the coming year, I understand. I think those plans are under review at the moment, so that may not be the final word on them, but that's brilliant. I've gathered from Sam that the commitment may feature in different aspects of the different YAB plans. It may be on environment, it may be on the well-being, whatever, but there is that commitment to getting involved and supporting the campaign, which is great. I've mentioned the two contacts at Matthew Advice Project. Again, that's great. And the other thing I suppose to say is that Grace, who I know is really under a lot of pressure at the moment, she's actually in Ireland at the moment, her dad's bedside in hospital. And she literally emailed me just before the meeting and sent me some first thoughts or some latest thoughts on this, with apologies that she couldn't be with us. So, I've sent her best wishes and, really understand the difficulty that she's in at the moment. But she started to think about, if you like, the brand development work for this, because the way we actually promote this is going to be very important. And as I did, she actually looked up, she Googled the phrase First Nature. And came back with, if I can find the thing to share, came back with this rather interesting definition, if you like, or the relevance of the choice of first nature. In science, our first nature is widely acknowledged as being our fundamental biological, physiological functions: breathing, swallowing, chewing, sucking, eating. By emphasizing this in our branding, we're communicating that the act of caring for our planet needs to become our ultimate first nature. So I guess it's really about drawing I think, an interesting and relevant parallel with that, what you might call the instinctive aspects of being a human, particularly obviously at childhood, and saying that, you know, whereas second nature is something that we learn over time by repetition and so on, first nature is about instinct. And therefore what we're stressing here is that connecting with nature, looking after nature, should be an instinct that we not only conserve but also promote. I hope that makes sense. I think that's a rather nice definition in a way, if anyone asks. And as I say, Alice is developing a sort of communication strategy around that, and developing a brand logo and so on that we can use in that as well. So that's really where we've been to, I think, on the involvement and communication side. As far as resources are concerned, there's been some interesting discussions there, and my apologies if some of you have heard this before, but I've had discussions with an organisation called Action Funder, used to be called Semble, you may have heard of them, who have worked with housing associations. So Dan will become interested at this point, housing associations at a national level on a project called Backyard Nature, which has been funded, I think, through a combination of housing association funding and other charitable sources. And the principle of that is actually to fund young people to develop projects in their area that in some way are going to benefit nature, mitigate climate change or whatever. I think grants of up to £500 are available. This is a national scheme at the moment. I had a very interesting discussion with Sophie Forge from Action Funder and Yvonne Ogden from Clarion Futures, which is the charitable arm of Clarion Housing Association. And they were both keen on the idea, and I think still are, of developing a Norfolk project along a similar line. So something with a particular local focus, and which is based on research locally on the sorts of projects that might well be coming forward or supported, with young people being in the lead on this. And the other angle on that from the resource point of view was, apart from obviously the interest and maybe financial involvement that housing associations might have, because this might well, and this is I think where their interest comes from, enable them to involve their tenants, particularly younger tenants, in projects that are to do with green spaces in their estates. So it's about, if you like, improving an area of regularly mown grass and turning it into something that's much more valuable from a biodiversity point of view. That's, I think, the housing association angle on it. And Dan, you might want to come in and comment on this in a moment. But from the resources point of view, again, you may have heard of something called the Climate Action Fund, which is a lottery pot of money, quite a large pot of money, that has recently been, I think, promoted again. I think there have been previous rounds of this. The next round, I think, is coming in January. And one of the more attractive features of this is there are no timescale deadlines. It's something that you can bid, I think, for development funding on, and then bid large sums to carry out, again, projects that are about climate action and associated things. And the associated things are very much about biodiversity improvement, health and well-being, food security, and so on. So I think that's a really good possibility, and something which I'm having discussions with others about in connection with another project that links in here called Community Wilding Norfolk, which some of you may have heard of or been involved with. So that's the big opportunity, I suppose. But I guess the other thing that we need to consider at some point is, do we need support to actually enable the campaign to run and be administered? We're all, doing this as part of jobs or on a voluntary basis at the moment, and I appreciate that's not always ideal. So it may well be that at an early stage we need to think about what opportunities are there to secure some funding for some support to actually develop the campaign and all that goes with that in terms of promotional materials, events, and so on and so forth. I don't know whether anyone's got any thoughts on any of that. I say, Dan, you might want to come in on the Backyard Nature idea, but if anyone's got any other thoughts on the resources front, that would be very helpful as well to hear.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak on the backyard nature point quickly. I think so. I had a chat with Eva and myself sort of right at the start of my role in last January, and it's sort of something we're still kind of keen to get involved in that sort of arena in terms of sort of getting young people involved with projects. It's sort of taken a back seat in terms of just as I feel my way through my own role, but it's certainly something we're still kind of keen to explore in the future.
Yeah, good. That's good. I mean, Flagship is a very large group of housing associations across the county, and hopefully we can roll in a few more of your neighbours, if you like, in terms of housing associations in this as we get that going. So that's a bit of a work in progress, I think, and we have further meetings planned to discuss that in a bit more detail. Any other comments so far?
Yeah, I was just thinking, Nigel, I'm kind of happy to go away and ask about any comms resource, whether or not we can commit anything, because it kind of goes over so many areas of work, not just for us, but also with the wider council and some of the partnership work that we're doing.
Yeah.
Before I go away and ask, I've been scribbling down some notes. So Alice's role in terms of producing the logo, is she supporting the kind of comms pack or production of kind of wider comms materials, or is it just?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you know much about her, but her background is very much marketing and communications, okay. And she does this on a voluntary basis, and I think a part voluntary, part paid basis with Wild East, which is her principal reason for being involved. And from the discussions I've had with her, she obviously knows what she's talking about, and I've been very happy to let her lead the thinking, if you like, on this area, albeit as I've just said, for reasons I've explained, that's very constrained at the moment. So, yeah, of course. But if you're saying, Kerry, that
I'm happy to ask.
Yeah, exactly. I think let's leave it open. If you've asked the question, we can find ways of combining resources in a creative way, and
because we've obviously got kind of a big comms team, so I can see whether or not there's any space within that to take on this piece of work. So it wouldn't be funding per se, but resource perhaps. So I'm definitely happy to go away and just ask, and then I could work with you to maybe just scope out a bit of a comms briefing of what exactly it is that the First Nature campaign is doing. And also it'd be helpful to understand, I guess, where schools or young people or parents and carers are being directed to in terms of finding like an activity finder locally.
Absolutely.
Is that something that sits behind this?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the activity finder. I mean, again, that's a very useful connection. People aren't aware of that. That's something that Active Norfolk have developed in the last few months, and it's an online resource that is gradually being built up to provide information on a whole range of mainly physical activities, I think it is really, isn't it? But nonetheless, it's that sort of model that maybe is something, begs the question, do we need a website, and so on and so forth,
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, or whether or not another partner has something already that we could kind of piggyback upon, because if you're having a big campaign or work be scaled up if needed, that's talking about the importance of these things, we need to then be able to help people to kind of mobilize that and have it happen.
Absolutely.
Kind of, just things to think about, perhaps.
No, very good points. If any of you can ask some questions, as Kerry said, and see what might be available on a lend-lease basis, people's time, or whatever, be very helpful. Thank you. Then the final area, which I've done finally, because I'd hoped that perhaps Kate would have been with us by now, but I'll say what I know, which is about the mapping of provision and the starting of the discussion about, where are the priorities for plugging gaps, if you like. Katie Briscoe from Wisbeach Community Farm, who was leading on this, unfortunately couldn't be with us today. I had a brief chat with her last week. Kate Jackson, I think, from Wild East, has done a lot of the work. She was the person that set up this online, I suppose, resource, if you like, mapping of links and what's available, which I think I sent a link round in the email on Friday. That's a very good starting point, but clearly, if you've looked at it, you'll have seen, as I've seen, that it's very, very general. We don't know what is being provided where, by whom, to what age group or whatever. And I think, you know, the next stage is to get into that sort of mapping in another level of detail, so that we can start to have some constructive discussions about, well, what's missing? You know, where do we need to strengthen things? What else do we need to do? Are there obvious gaps in provision? And linked with that, there was the question of, you know, how do we build into this campaign ways of measuring the impact of what we're doing as well? Mustn't forget that, a very important thing that will help, hopefully, the long-term legacy and future of what we hope to start. So not much more to say really on that, I'm afraid, at the moment. I do know that Wild East have and Kate may want to say something about this when she arrives, developing a schools programme, which I think they're running out over half-term holiday in the end of October. Kate's been doing a lot of work on that, I know. And that, you know, is a very, very solid step forward in terms of the sort of things that we're trying to do more generally, I think. Anything anyone wants to come back on? Really, what I've not said is very much really at the moment, I'm afraid, but if you've got any comments on that?
If I may, so I don't know, I can't find my hand up function, so I'm just being rude, so apologies.
A real hand is as valid as a false hand, don't worry.
The schools programme that Kate's linking into, it'd be really good to link her in with my wider colleagues from Children Young People's team within the health sector, because they are recruiting support workers within each of the schools, and they're just piloting it in certain schools at the moment, where I think the Wild East Schools programme could link very nicely with what's going on in the health arena. So I think it'd be really good to link Kate and my colleagues in the Children Young People's team together in that initiative.
Yeah. Well, you've hopefully got a list of contacts with email addresses. If not, I can send that round again. But even if you just look at the last email,
previously, Nigel, but if I haven't, I'll ask you for it.
Yeah, and you can get in touch that way directly. That's absolutely fine. Very good idea. Yeah.
And the mapping of provision, there's already, as we already know, there's lots of little bits everywhere, and Norfolk Directory and Norfolk Insights we know is really good. Who's going to identify which elements are for the age groups that we're looking at? And how are you going to put that as a repository, as a directory of support offer that is available? And then third question, sorry, Nigel, and then I'll be quiet, is how will you monitor the capacity for any of these voluntary organisations to deal and support with that? Will they need funding themselves to support any wider, you know, as an ICB, do I have to go and find commissioning funding to support a voluntary sector organisation in supporting increased referral uptake? Yeah, no, very, very relevant questions, Claire. I mean, that's in a sense what happens next. It seems to me that we need to do that detailed assessment of, you know, what do we collectively think needs to be developed to plug existing gaps, which might be geographical gaps, they might be cultural or ethnic based, whole range of possibilities there. Who does that, I think, is a bit of an open question. We've had these small groups, you know, doing what they can so far, and it's really a question of, you know, are people within those groups or others within the wider group able to give some time to actually doing that research in a bit more detail? Or is this an example of where we need to actually plug in some extra resource to enable that to happen? I'm quite open and honest that we can only move at, you know, the speed at which we collectively are prepared and able to move, really. But I think following on from that, I didn't mention when I mentioned resources, I should have done that. Backyard Nature, I mentioned that as an example, is a self-contained project that to some extent is already operating in the area, but would become even more prominent and relevant if it had a Norfolk-wide theme to it, if you like, and Norfolk housing associations were in there backing it and so on. And likewise, if we've got existing voluntary organisations or groups that are doing great work but would like some more resource to do more,
I think we're in a position collectively, A, to identify that, and then B, to look at what the possibilities might be to assist them. That might be directing them to, you know, known pots of money. It might be saying, well, this is something completely new. We need to think about this in a strategic way, and maybe, I don't know, approach the health authority. I don't know whether that's relevant, to say, look, you know, this is something that appears to be ticking all the boxes that you want to tick. Is there an opportunity for the ICB to actually fund things like this? So that's a bit further down the track, I think. But I mean, that's how I see the journey. I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah, good. See him nodding. Good. So can we move on then, if that's all right? I mean, obviously, this say we're covering the agenda pretty well, but it won't be the final say on this, I'm sure. In terms of priorities, just going back to that list of aims we had, I'll give you my take on it. I think in the immediate future, our priorities are about involvement and communications, particularly with children and young people. And I've already mentioned that I think we've made some positive steps in that direction already. I think it's also about existing what you might call nature connection providers. We identified those as a separate aim and making sure they're on board, sharing what they do, reviewing what they do, and collectively coming to some conclusions about what needs to change or be developed or whatever. I'd like to suggest to you that from all those aims in the immediate future, those are our primary priorities, if you like. But there are a couple of others that I think come along perhaps a bit behind, but not far behind. One is aimed at, I think, those other providers of services to children and young people that aren't necessarily about nature connection. And that should be about encouraging them to get on board with this and to say, well, what could we do? What might we do? And the other area, which is the one really we've been talking about, is the one of resources, where I think what we do need to do is to both think about the resources that we need for the campaign to move forward, the admin, the mapping, all those sorts of communication and support that we've touched on, and then to start to identify, based on that analysis of where the gaps are, what needs to be funded and what opportunities there might be to do that through existing sources of funding or maybe new. I don't know if that makes sense, but it seemed to me that for looking through that list of aims, that those were the 3 or 4 that we ought to be focusing on in the next, you know, few months or indeed maybe a year, you know, in terms of how the timescale of this rolls out. And then obviously, as we get established and things start to happen, some of those other audiences and some of those other objectives or aims, if you like, can become much more to the fore. Anyone want to come back on that? I mean, what's your take on it? Does that seem to make sense, or have I got it completely wrong? Hands up.
I think it makes a lot of sense, Nigel, and I'm just thinking out loud here. As we've moved into an integrated care system, an integrated care partnership where we're all under the one umbrella. I wonder, and there's a lovely new website that has been developed, and website development, as we all know, can be very expensive. I wonder, and that if we should continue, we could potentially utilize that website, and I'm already working with the developers to for the social prescribing offer. This definitely fits under that banner, and I think it, from a website point of view, to getting the information out there to workforce, public and provider organisations, it's a good access point to be able to relay all this information. And that might just be another link to Backyard Nature, I don't know, but as a central platform, it's already there, it's already paid for.
Yeah,
I've got free access to it because of my role, and this fits very nicely under the personalisation and social prescribing agenda that Health and Social are trying to deliver on. So very happy to have those conversations, and if the collective is in agreement with that, and obviously we can get it on council websites as well, and I've got access.
I think that's the point. Yeah, I think
access to those as well. But eventually, because we are an integrated care partnership, it will be one website,
Yeah,
and then that
No,
will
that's very
devolve down
helpful.
into locality and place.
yeah.
But, it might be 2 or 3 clicks away, but it does get
Yeah.
there.
Very helpful, Claire. Thank you very much. I mean, that sounds like a brilliant idea to me. And as you say, I think as we found, I mentioned the community wilding project earlier. What we found is we started with hosting a page on the Green Care Network's website around tree planting and hedge planting schemes and other links to other advice and so on around that. And that's proved, I think, very useful. People have found it great having all that relevant information in one place, if you like, or links to it. So I think having a central platform, if that's the term, makes a lot of sense. But equally, as you said, links to that and links to other things can be developed in parallel, can't they? Yeah, great, thank you.
And I think I mentioned this as the last meeting, and Kerry, it might be something that your team might be able to pick up from a comms perspective, is making that information accessible, because not everybody uses digital.
Yeah.
In different languages, in easy read, and having it potentially printed, which of course everyone will be concerned that goes out of date very quickly. But if we keep it quite broad and generic, we could get it on supermarket pinballs, libraries, food banks, you name it. We could get to wherever we need. Vaccine clinics, I know where every single vaccine clinic is within Norfolk and Waveney. We can get the information out there, because a lot of people don't access digital, although it's a great central repository.
Yeah,
there is wider thoughts that we need to think about if we're going to actually achieve what we want to achieve and meet those.
very good. Posters and flyers and things like that, really, isn't it, what you're talking about?
Yeah, definitely, especially for the launch.
Yeah, excellent, thank you.
And I could probably find you some money for that, she says.
That always helps. Great stuff. Any other comments really before we move on to think about the launch perhaps a bit? No, okay. Well, let's talk about the launch. I previously talked about us trying to do something, I think, by the end of October. I guess my thinking there was, before winter really sets in, and we get the opportunity perhaps to bring together a whole host of organisations that we started to talk about, to really do, I suppose, the spade work over the winter with an eye on, when the spring arrives next summer, we've maybe got things to offer or point people towards that are very much about getting out there and connecting with nature in some way, and a variety of ways of doing that. So that was the thinking in terms of the timing, which I hope makes sense. But if you disagree, then please say so. I had talked at, I think, the last meeting about the possibility of piggybacking on an event that Norfolk Wildlife Trust are running, which is on the 19th of October at the Forum. This is a talk being given by Patrick Barkham. Some of you may know he's a locally based journalist with The Guardian and has written several books, one of which I'm reading at the moment, which is very interesting, called Wild Child. I can plug that for you, worth a read. Unfortunately, but understandably, that's not going to be possible because the Wildlife Trust are also launching something in connection with that as well. And it was seen, I think it would be a bit too confusing if we tried to do too many things at the same event, which is fair enough. So that option is really not on the table. Sam Mason, who I mentioned earlier, did give me her thoughts, which I'll throw at you, which I think are very interesting, which might provide us with a model to go forward. She was thinking of something that would be perhaps towards the end of October, and with an eye on half term again, something perhaps the Saturday before half term begins. I mentioned Wild East have got this program that kicks off in the week following, so it could be a useful link to be made between the launch of the campaign and their program. But Sam's ideas, which I think are very good, were to try and get some existing providers along to maybe give information, maybe in the form of displays or presentations about what they're currently doing. So we get a flavour of what's already happening out there. But equally, we need to engage children and young people, so getting them along as well. to hear about this, to hear about the campaign, and obviously also with an eye on the wider media, trying to get the wider media engaged so the message starts to get out. So I guess, you know, what is shaping in my mind is some sort of, again, it may be the forum is a location for this or somewhere similar, but somewhere relatively central, which tends to mean Norwich, I guess, where you've got a combination of an event that people can visit to find out information about what's going on. So displays, tabletop leaflets, whatever it might be. But in parallel with that, some presentation stroke discussions around what the campaign is trying to do. That's where I'm at. What are your thoughts?
It would be good to try and get somebody like Look East then to come in and do a bit of info and maybe get it on the local news.
Yeah, absolutely. See, Kate's joined us. Hello, Kate. Welcome.
Hi.
Just for your information, Kate, before I come back, we're relatively small in number, which is disappointing. So I've sort of rather scrambled through the agenda so far to get some general discussion, but I think we all recognise that we need more people here to actually speak with authority, if you like, on certain things. I did mention the Wild East Schools programme, which I think is going out in half term, isn't it, at the end of October.
Well, the Wild East Schools programme is in full flow. That's where I've just been. I've just been in a school. I'm doing activities at half term at Fritton Lake as part of a pledges activity, but the actual schools programme, and now we've got 25 schools signed up. So by Christmas,
Excellent.
and more signing up all the time. So hopefully we'll get some more funding because,
Well, we've been talking about funding and there have been some positive comments. I'm recording this, by the way, so you will be able to watch what's gone before. We're at the point where we're starting to talk about a launch event. And I was just saying that Sam Mason from Momentum had suggested that maybe we could have some sort of a centrally based combination of projects that are already out there doing stuff like Wild East and others, displaying what they do, the opportunity for people to come in and find out more, but also some discussions, presentations about what the campaign is about. And maybe, I think when I mentioned this to Alice, she was slightly concerned if we did it the weekend before half term, that might be a bit difficult from your point of view. But I was just saying,
I'm fully committed that weekend because I'm chairing a sustainability food and farming event in Bungay on the Saturday, and then I'm at Fritton on the Sunday, so that weekend's definitely out for me.
Right, okay, well maybe from your point of view then that's not on, but that was just a thought. I mean, maybe we do something towards the end of October, or maybe just, you know, into early November, I don't know, but maybe a Saturday event at the forum or something like that. I don't know. I was just about to canvass views on that. So I think
forum is very expensive, and I'm talking a lot of money.
Yeah. I'm not sure whether maybe we can bend a few arms on that. I'm not sure, but anyway, go on. Kerry, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just wondering whether or not you could consider a kind of staged launch, so that you've got different parts, so that the actual launch event and stuff perhaps could be something that comes later in the summer, or costs involved once you've got all those partners, but it could initially be more about promoting the kind of general thinking behind the campaign to the public and to children, so that then you have potential to kind of shape it up according to kind of involvement from children and involvement from focus groups and some of the other partners. So just kind of really saying that we could launch more slowly and have different stages to it as well, because October is quite a small kind of turnaround period. So yeah, just a different way of doing it perhaps.
Yeah, interesting. What do other people feel about that?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot going on in the very near future in terms of campaigning, having seen what's come out of the RSPB and Wildlife Plus this weekend. I think there's going to be a lot of very high profile media coverage about, you know, the government legislation, nature, environment. So whether that's something we can jump off, or whether that's actually going to be overwhelming anything we try and do, I don't know which way. This is where we need Alice. Marketing is not my strength.
Yeah.
engaging 200 primary school children is.
Yeah, I don't know if you're aware, but Alice is actually with her father in Ireland at the moment, and she couldn't be with us unfortunately because of that. But she's had some initial thoughts around the branding and the marketing side of things. But you raise an interesting point, which I've only recently, I suppose, come across, and it was interesting while we were talking. I had an email from Adam Murray at the RSPB in connection with the Community Wilding Project, and he was saying that basically, with all the government proposals to attack, that was a word he used, I think, the nature legislation, they're going to be, you know, more than exercised in doing that in the coming weeks and months. Is that the rest of your? I mean, again, I'm obviously behind the curve on this, but as you say, Kate, is that something that maybe we can fasten on?
Yeah, I mean, it's literally, it was yesterday, was on social, this has come out the mini budget, I think, but yesterday on social media, particularly on Twitter, the RSPB and Wildlife Trust put really strong statements, and they're using the hashtag attack on nature, and they're talking about forming coalitions and protests and things. So it's really, you know, for two big organizations like that are, you know, by their nature a little bit bureaucratic, a little bit clunky at times, because they are huge organizations, for them to take such strong statements is, you know, meaningful and powerful. So I think there's going to be action coming out there.
Yeah, interesting. Other views? What do people think about the idea of staging this in the way that Kerry suggested? No, okay.
Sorry, Nigel, I couldn't unmute my camera. Just putting it out there, and I wonder if we should use Zoom, Teams, record something, send it to all the schools so they can play it in an assembly, or put it on their own website, schools' websites. And I just wonder if a digital version of it would hit the most people very effectively with little input from us, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, good thought.
That's just what we would do in the health sector. If we want to attract lots of people, vaccination program being prime example, we have definitely used the digital arena to enable that, to get the messages out there.
Yeah,
and it generally works very successfully.
Yeah, it goes back to your earlier point about using different channels, really, I suppose, to reach different audiences as well. So yeah, I take that point. Kerry.
Sorry, on mute. Just echoing what Claire said, really. We've produced COVID resources for schools in the past, which obviously have to go out quite quickly. And we use MI sheets that go out to head teachers once a month, and that's really where all of the general updates are for schools. And they're a really good way if you wanted to have an assembly outline and perhaps a kind of no more than a page long briefing, because anything longer than that doesn't get read, and then some kind of key actions and places to go, which would kind of link with what Claire was saying about perhaps having some ICB kind of website presence as well. That would be a really good way of doing something. And often when we've done that, we've had different plans based on where we are at different times of the year. So COVID behaviour is changing, for example, but we could be talking about some of the different programmes and different organisations that are on board. And it's a good way of approaching schools.
Yeah, I mean, the more you're talking, the more what is in my mind is this is a very, what's the word, dispersed launch. It might be staged in terms of time, but we may have a point where we actually go public, and that means a number of different strands of activity. You know, the things that you talked about in terms of digital, other ways of communicating the audiences that we need to communicate with. I mean, Alice, I'm sure will be very interested to explore these. The MI
it's really good to be chaired or presented by the contacts that you have from the Youth Advisory Board as well, because kids listen to kids, they won't listen to us.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, yeah, so that's another stage and way of involving them. Absolutely, yeah.
Sorry, what's an MI? Did you say an MI?
I was about to say MI. Is it management information?
I don't know. It's, yeah. It's just a big lot of information that's sent out by the education team.
Yeah.
And they produce all of it, and I've had various kind of resources and stuff go out to schools, but I was very much warned against sending out individual pieces of information to schools because they just don't get read and they get
Same with
bombarded.
health,
with
it
so
won't
much.
get read. It's
Yes,
not
so
it's not the school's priority. It's not a general practice's priority.
So is
yeah,
that
so it's a
Norfolk County
coordinate-
Council?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So are you saying that both of you would carry on, Claire? I mean, we've got other ways, smarter ways of reaching those audiences, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Well, that's
A
great.
way that it would be kind of read and seen.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
And not cost
Yeah,
out.
yeah. Kind of better chance than nothing. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's very helpful. Yeah. But coming back to the fundamentals, are we really saying then that we need some sort of point in time where we're going public, perhaps put it in those terms? This idea of a launch then is we need obviously certain basic information together about what the campaign is concerned with, key messages, I suppose, and what we're going to be trying to do over the coming months, who we want to make contact with and why, who we'd like to be actively involved and why, and then a series of other events is perhaps the wrong word to use, but other ways of channeling communication to different audiences over the subsequent months. Is that the way we see it? Yeah, I'm getting nods. Good. Good. Is that okay with you, iPhone?
Yes, it is. That sounds really sensible. I used to be a teacher, and I have to say that I think the idea of sending videos in that they could use in assembly is brilliant. I think that would be a really useful resource for them, and a really good way of sharing information. It could be shared with the tutors in tutor group time as well, because there's often time for that if it wasn't a central year group assembly.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Well, I mean, I think we've probably taken that discussion about as far as we can today, because I think we've got that wider audience we need to engage with us, but some very interesting ideas there. Thank you very much for those contributions. Question is, where do we go from here, I suppose? Obviously, there's the recording of today, which I will circulate around to the wider group. There's a question of what I then say to that wider group about coming together. I was going to say today that perhaps we needed to meet again in a couple of weeks' time. But is that realistic? What's your take on that from where you sit? So if we went, 2 weeks today, 4 o'clock till 5 o'clock, to have what we intended to do in the broader sense today, you think that's realistic?
Yeah, I haven't got my diary in front of me. I've left it in my bag as I ran in the door. But
I've just
yeah,
got a general feel, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we need to. I was just trying to think about how to get everybody. I suppose it's that thing, isn't it? We need to make sure that everybody. I think about it, kind of. We want all of the sort of people who are involved to feel like that they're getting something out of it, as well as, if you see what I mean.
Sure.
And I'm just thinking in terms of like a video, in terms of having if we had a base where we could all produce little short videos that then could be mashed together to make a longer one of, here's 60 seconds from Wild East on something you can do. Here's 60 seconds from the Wildlife Trust. Here's 60 seconds from the Broads. Here's 60 seconds. And they could all be individual little videos that could go out separately, but they could also come together as one First Nature thing,
Yeah.
showing how we're all collaborating, showing how, and the youth group, all the different, because it's really tricky because it's such a broad beast, isn't it, in a way, what we're trying to do. It's not just
Sure.
people like me who are going into schools, it's all the youth work and the health side, and it's so broad. It's knowing how to
Yeah. No,
simplify it.
Good point. Yeah. No, I mean that I think is in line with what we were saying earlier, really, about short, sharp, punchy, getting to different audiences, but demonstrating the range of what it is we're interested in and what we want to promote and so on. So yeah, good thought.
Greenlight Trust are doing some amazing videos at the moment. Some of their social media content is fantastic on
Who's that? Sorry.
Greenlight Trust
Oh,
down
yes.
in Lawshore and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, they're doing some really things that are just popping up on Facebook that are really great little videos of how to do this or how to do that, and they're really well put together. Yeah, I've been really impressed.
Yeah, good. We talked before you arrived about potential help with comms from public health, and I think Claire as well from the ICB and stuff like that. So that's promising, I think. I don't think we can make much further progress until we get, literally a quorum. We need, key organisations to come together and agree the basics. Now that may be difficult given what we were saying earlier about the agenda that's now arising nationally about nature. But in a sense, it underlines the importance of what we're doing, isn't it? In terms of promoting access to nature and the health and well-being benefits that will bring. What I will do, and tell me if I've got a different idea, is I will email everyone on the contact list tomorrow with a link to the recording that we've done today, so they can see that. I'll try and bring out key points I think that we need to agree on, more or less, I guess, along the lines of the agenda that we had today. And I will suggest a further online meeting for two weeks today and see what response I get. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other business?
Nigel, will you ask the providers, sorry, I don't know what the terminology you want me to use is, so the Backyard Nature, the Wild East, etc., with Beach Community Farm, start pulling the information together into some sort of pack, so I can, and then if we are going to go down to putting it on a central ICS website, then I can just send it to the relevant people within our digital team and get them to upload that, because it does take time.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think there's a lot of sense in that. I suppose I would suggest at the moment, because we've obviously not had a full discussion agreement about this, that if I say that, what you've just referred to, Claire, makes sense anyway, actually putting that information together as part of the sort of mapping that we've started to do. Yeah, I think we can ask for that.
Yeah, and if we're going to do a video anyway, we would need that as part
Yeah.
of the video content if we are going to go down that route and get
Yeah.
it out to the
Yeah.
schools, etc. So
Yeah, sure. Kerry.
Sorry, I was just going to say, following on from what Claire's just said, if we are going out to the kind of service providers, it'd be worth maybe asking them to complete a template that says what age group their services are suitable for, just so that we've got all of that information prepped. So maybe between us we could come up with what information needs to be included, and external links, and then ask everybody to fill it in, because at least then it will give us a view of what we're kind of signposting people towards, I guess.
That's very sensible. It's similar to some of the thing I've done as part of the Green Care Coalition nationally, where they're putting together a number of case studies of green care, and they've done exactly what you said, Kerry. Well, if you've got any thoughts on that, anyone, literally, get back to me today, tomorrow, with what that might be. But I'll perhaps put that out as a suggestion. And yes, Claire.
sorry, I promise I'll be quiet one day. Just thinking out loud again and thinking wider than First Nature. Once we start engaging these children, young people into First Nature, and actually they start relaxing, opening up, talking to professionals within that arena, it often unravels a whole host of other concerns that child or young person may have, often health related, often mental health related. So for me, and this is definitely where I see my hat sitting, is okay, we need, those providers need to make onward referrals to COOTH. This is just the children and young people's COOTH, Quell, Mind. I can give you a whole host of organisations that can support, and they're just the mental health ones. So yeah, I mean, absolutely right. And I know it's further down the line and we don't know who they're going to engage with, but it's still relevant.
The principle is absolutely spot on, I think, absolutely right. And you know, you talked about a central website platform. that's the sort of place that could have those sorts of links and a bit of
Yeah, it does, it's
about the
already
agencies.
there, but unless the
Yeah.
provider so Wild East or Wisbech Farm or whomever
Yeah.
know about them, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah,
Sure.
that would be, as a teacher, like I'm a forest school leader as well, so children, you know, we do have young people and children who tell us things, and actually apart from referring to, you know, where there's a safeguarding concern, obviously we can go down the MASH kind of or CAF route
Yeah,
with
but
the families,
that's not necessary.
but that's
None of
but that early support kind of you know, that first action is where we actually don't often have the information of what support is available.
Absolutely, and it's not always, the parents don't always have to be involved.
No.
Yeah.
So very happy to share information. I think it's really important that we acknowledge again that actually it's far bigger than First
Absolutely.
Nature, because it will
Yeah.
be, because I know we've all worked with children with it or have children. We know what happens when they start feeling confident, comfortable, whatever that might be, outside of their barrier of families and friends, then they do definitely open up.
Yeah, very good point. Before we finish, Kate, I don't know whether you would say anything more about the mapping work you've done. I said a little bit at the beginning that Katie couldn't be with us today, and I did have a chat with her last week and said we'd obviously be in touch about the next stage. What we did say earlier was, I think that, you know, clearly that's got to a baseline, which is very, very useful, the online database that you put together. And we now need, I think, to bury into that to find out what does that mean in terms of what's going on where.
Yeah, I think this idea of having a sort of template of so like a first level and a second level, the first level being the organisations who are actually involved in First everything has East at the end of it for me now. First Nature, a list of all the organisations who are involved in, and like our target audience, so schools, age range, and what we do, like a one line what we do. I think that would be one really useful kind of sheet on the spreadsheet. And then the second page is the kind of wider resources that are just generally available, you know, the ones that are nationally available, or organisations, you know, information, resources that are out there that don't necessarily have people who are involved in this network, but that we can signpost to.
Yeah. I mean, I repeat what I said earlier, if you've got any ideas on the specifics of that we might, you know, develop this template idea, let me have them immediately. And I'll put them together as an attachment perhaps to this email I'll send around tomorrow, if that makes sense. That again is, you know, will be open for discussion, I'm sure, but okay, great. Anything else anyone wants to raise? If not, again, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. I say it's disappointing we didn't get the turnout I was expecting. It may be due to what we were saying earlier about, you know, recent announcements and perceived threats, shall we say, which is worrying in itself, but maybe again gives us an opportunity. So next stage is I'll be in touch tomorrow, and hopefully putting your diary now, 4 o'clock till 5:30, 10th of October, I think it will be. All right. Thanks a lot. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye now.